I could see very, very clearly that I would be fairly foolish to pass up an opportunity to play such a juggernaut of a woman.
Mildred Pierce, the miniseries, versus the 1945 film that was made, the two are vastly different.
Like, it was an actor's dream to do this.
If when you're talking about life and death events, and you're talking about illness, you're talking about love and romance, it's all in there, and it's up to us to mix it up and serve it.
This was so much harder than every film project I've done since Titanic, and that's saying a lot.
Okay, so here's my concern though. If I'm waiting, are you seeing me in a reflection? Because if
we are here.
Right, well, only there.
So it's as he crosses that you can start to move. So I want to see you for a second, and then you enter the frame, and then you go through.
Got it. I'm so prepared, you've no idea. What's my character's name again? Oh, Mildred.
As the financial markets were tumbling in the fall of '08, I opened up Mildred Pierce and tore through this pretty remarkable novel of James M. Cain. And it felt so intensely relevant to what was going on.
I mean, there's a depression on, there's a new president, there's a war on. There's just so many elements that make it feel like it could happen now.
It also felt like a tapestry of a story and a series of events that warranted a long-form dramatic treatment.
And I thought really the miniseries format would really give him a tremendous opportunity.
James M. Cain describes Mildred as this handsome, attractive woman with these great legs who just to sort of take stock of what she has and what she can offer the world and what her resources are given her new predicament. For some reason, I pictured Kate Winslet. This was the only actress I could see playing this part.
Mildred's desire to be successful, I think, comes from this incredible survival instinct that she has, which I do also share. My parents really just didn't have any money, and I was able to connect with Mildred on that level and just know what it's like to just really work hard to just, A, get by, and B, make something of yourself.
Okay.
Did we do the right thing?
Yeah.
Oh my God, we did!
She walks on a set and she has this presence and she's just in control.
What she was required to do for this part, given this shooting schedule, that's not for beginners. She's in every bloody scene. I mean, every scene, like every scene.
She had 66 changes in this. That's more than a person can deal with.
She's able to see everything that's going on around her, while at the same time deliver every time.
She was always able to make adjustments if she knew you needed something to make the image work. She's incredibly aware of how to use the camera.
Todd and I together, we had to really just think ahead a lot. Think, on Monday afternoon, think, okay, wow, we've got that big 7-page scene coming up on Friday. Okay, what do we need to do to get ready? Okay, fine, I'll go and work with the girls and make sure that they're fully up to speed and that we can be kind of mulling it over during the week. Meanwhile, we've got however many other epic scenes to get through before we get to that big epic scene that's going to crush us and kill us at 3 o'clock on a Saturday morning when we've already shot, a 19-hour day. It was like doing 2.5 films in, 16 weeks, but it was wonderful.
Well, Kate has a maturity and a sort of sense of the world that is very down to earth, and she's just amazing, really. She's just an incredible talent, very funny.
And what's your name, miss?
Ida. Yours?
Mildred Pierce.
Mildred! 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 Mildred in the chicken house! I got a job! I got a job, yeah!
My reason for being drawn to this material had so much to do with what was happening right now in the world and how much of an interesting window into this time our current situation provides.
When we started doing Mildred Pierce, Todd became very interested in the way that the 1970s cinema looked at the 1930s. And he was interested in looking at this world through the prism of that filmmaking style.
Interestingly, the 70s has more films set in the Depression than I can think of almost any decade producing. For me, it's an interesting point because it's the exact midway era between the 1930s and today. And in many ways, it kind of brackets the progressive era that the 30s began. Idolizing of wealth and unbridled consumption and ideals that are associated with our dear Vita. The ways that Coppola approached the gangster film in The Godfather, or the way Polanski approached the detective genre in Chinatown, brought that social political consciousness of the time in which they were making films to traditional genres without destroying them.
These were films that were dealing more with a naturalistic approach to the photography.
A sense of natural light and real locations and subtle, understated performances by this new generation of actors who brought a sense of a dressed-down kind of relatability, to these characters that they were playing. And that sort of became our mantra.
Todd had this idea to not see everything so clearly at times that the viewer would have the sense that our characters are entrapped by what they don't see or know.
Mark Friedberg introduced me to a photographer, Saul Leiter, who used windows and reflections and dusty surfaces as refractions to his images and gave you an even greater sense of the presence of being in that place at that time.
What Saul Leiter did for us was create an emotional state for the characters through the external world.
Lightery became a common descriptive term on the set. That's a lightery shot. Let's go a little lightery on this one.
This has been a pretty realistic depiction of this period. There's a lot more attention to detail, a lot more attention to history.
It was great working with Mark Friedberg again. The challenge of turning New York into LA, a lot of that was squarely on his shoulders.
We knew there were financial, economic incentives for shooting it in New York. And we found that the history of Los Angeles in the 1930s doesn't exist there either. We were going to have to invent it no matter where we shot this film. And might as well do it here.
The story is set in realms. And we wanted very much to make sure that as Mildred travels from realm to realm, that they were both historically accurate, but also distinct from one another.
We love that partial, semi-formed suburban sprawl that became that new form of a city.
This neighborhood in Long Island, the Gables, has maintained its historic character. The story was that the Gables was built for Hollywood actors working on this coast in the 30s, with the idea that they would feel at home in that setting.
We're putting some new rooftops on, the original terracotta sort of clay pot roof that was originally on the homes when they were first built. We're sort of trying as best as possible to sort of make them as close to original as they were. We're painting 4 or 5 of the homes. We are doing a lot of landscaping and gardening to sort of give it a more tropical California feel.
Mildred's house is fun, and it's a particular kind of architecture. It's definitely a sense of a prefab kind of an experience, of a nouveau riche kind of an experience, of a trying harder than it needs to kind of experience. Mildred is really concerned about appearances. And she's made her first house just so. It has a giant crest plastered into the wall with really showy Spanish draperies, as opposed to these more personal spaces. Bert's den, which is personal and lovely and particular to the life Bert lived, was a beautiful room.
Yes, all those matinees your mother dragged us to the Hollywood Bowl paid off in the end.
Everything did really feel like a home. I mean, I remember walking into Mildred's kitchen for the first time and Todd nudged me and he was like, open up a drawer. Opened up a drawer fully, it was like a home, everything totally set dressed, nothing about it was a facade. The refrigerator actually worked, it was all just there. And that did make a very big difference, particularly to the children, I think. They didn't have to spend any time being fascinated by the movie set.
We shot 27th and Madison and that area for downtown Los Angeles. And we had to shut those streets down and the art department had to go in and period those up.
Downtown LA was modeled after downtown New York. A lot of it went up in the 20s, specifically the neighborhoods around Madison Park. We wanted to contrast the grandeur of this architecture, both in terms of its difference with Glendale, with the provincial little neighborhood where Mildred is finally venturing out of now that she's a woman on her own, and also to contrast the Depression with the grandeur of this neighborhood. We used Peekskill to create Hollywood. One street worked particularly well for us, with a bank building and a curved deco building.
Peekskill had sort of a nice open feel to it and had these amazing buildings that really, you can't believe that it's not California.
Hollywood, for Mildred, is her first foray into life outside the home. She's going to be a waitress in a diner.
Morning. Sorry I'm late.
Therefore, I was interested in making sure that the diner played almost as an exterior, that it played to a street. What we got from that was a three-dimensional, non-digital, humanly interactive environment that we could see through our plate glass window of our restaurant, which we ended up building.
Yeah, I think something skinnier or, with like nice big tropical leaves.
At the very beginning, we carted trees up from Florida, and where our stages where we had built sort of a big greenhouse, but big palm trees were out in the parking lot. One way to hide things you don't like are cars, trucks, and trees.
Delicious chicken.
Thank you.
Mildred has two restaurants, really, that we see that are hers. She has her first restaurant in Glendale, and that was a built set here at Steiner Studios that we found an exterior for in Point Lookout, New York.
Ace job, Mother. That ocean view is really quite stunning.
Mildred's Laguna restaurant was a bigger challenge because Laguna is along the coast. It's supposed to be in the rougher water where people don't swim. So we found a small yacht club on the North Shore of Long Island. And then with some help from digital effects, we were able to connect that world and that water with a beach scene as if she's walked around the corner.
Pretty gloomy, huh? Not what it used to be.
The Woolworth Mansion doubled as Monty's grand mansion that is in various states of disrepair.
The big demonstration of Mildred's success was her ability to now buy, essentially, the life of this man that she'd dabbled with and turn his decaying mansion into a beautiful, opulent success.
I tell you, it's all Monty.
One of the most beautiful rooms in all the city of New York is the Palace Theater up on 178th Street. It's an old, big, beautiful, gilded theater that felt perfect. But we were very concerned about what would the exterior look like. How would we do downtown LA version of this LA Philharmonic? And we were going to make it pretty much a digital effect experience until we did the research and found out what the Philharmonic looked like, which was architecturally almost identical to the very location that we had. Visually, we've been very restrained in the story, and this is an opportunity as Vita is presenting herself to the world to make something loud. Here we are in 1937, 38, 39 in the world of high deco, a real exuberant outward design that is very different than anything we've seen in the first 4.5 hours.
You wanted honor, Anne?
Half the women at the funeral were without coats.
But this isn't the same day as the funeral.
No,
and
it is not. This is dress in a hurry. I want Grandma to have some glasses on a chain.
Action. Anne Roth. Oh my God. The whole experience was just so fantastic.
I just said, look, my God, if we could get Anne Roth, which would be impossible because, first of all, she won't be available in a million years. And Todd said, okay, well, let's just try. And Anne said yes.
Anne's amazing attention to detail of not just having the right hat, but making sure that that hat is worn exactly the right way that somebody would wear it.
And this is a massive sprawl of a story for her to costume.
There was so much to do. 1931, 1933, 1937, 39, and 40. The look of the period is on the fragile side. In fact, a lot fragile. And people had very few clothes. And no one had any idea whose name was on a label.
What's so great about Anne is it's never just about a piece of clothing. It's about the character. It's about some specific detail.
She would say things like, how many times a week do we think she does actually wash her hair? I think once, on a Sunday, at 4. And she just kind of plants the seed in your brain. You think, oh God, yeah, I like that. I'll take that idea. Okay, yes.
You kind of didn't know exactly who you are until you went through the Anne Roth process. And then you're like, oh. Because the way she puts you together and comes up with what you're going to look like is just marvelous.
In the first episode, you see Mildred wearing the same print dress over and over again. And you never see that in a movie with a beautiful star like Kate Winslet, you know?
Todd was very specific, saying that she had 3 cotton house dresses. There was such a thing as a house dress. A house dress had an apron. And then there was a dress for church, maybe 2 dresses. And maybe one of those was a party dress. The green satin dress that she wears New Year's Eve was a dress she bought off a rack. I have a feeling she did not cross the hills to buy that dress. She didn't have that kind of money.
Todd designed this great tracking shot where he just pans from one side of the room to the other. At the end of the line, there's Mildred, and I'm sitting with my legs crossed. Anne is standing there by the camera and she's looking at everybody. She walks past me and she says, with the girdle you have on, there's no way you can cross your legs.
So when you're in that girdle, it just holds you in a certain position and implies a certain behavior, manners. Young Vita, she didn't go into town and buy her own clothes. So I would pretend that if she was visiting her grandmother, and her grandmother said, what do you want for your birthday? And she says, I want some satin pajamas. She can't say a cigarette holder.
I think the barrette is really what helps me get into character. It's like, I have the barrette on. I am Vita now.
I think my favorite outfit was a long, silky, black, fish-tailed gown with a cape and a glittery hat and a veil. I mean, I've never felt more like a diva in my entire life.
If I ever saw one right out of the can, Mrs. Pierce, she's it.
We went for very specific looks with the extras, too, based on old photographs.
This was hard. There were 2,000 extras. 2,000.
Whenever we'd have a big crowd day, she would be there at 4:30 a.m. making sure that every extra had their hat tilted at the right angle, the skirt lengths, jacket lengths were right, sleeve lengths were right. It's really such a privilege to, stand alongside her and be dressed by her. Mildred was extremely remarkable in that determination and that, absolute need to just survive somehow.
Falling apart, hitting bottom, and crawling back up on her own.
And not just survive, do well, do really well, and make something of herself for her children.
And this is set in a very specific economic shift from the boom of the 1920s into the bust of the 30s, very similar to what we're looking at today in this country.
There's not a thing on earth you're trained to do. What I'm telling you is you haven't got a chance.
She has to go out and try and find a job, any job that she can get in order to get by.
You here to work?
So darn proud. These strange standards to be this sort of immaculate image of stoicism and poise and grace for both her girls. But she did it, she did it.
There was probably an epiphany there for Mildred. Look, these strong women are making a living and standing up for themselves.
She is this woman with enormous faculties at her disposal of strength, a sort of intense desire to work and produce, and to solve problems.
From now on, I'm a businesswoman. As a woman, to start her own business from absolutely nothing, it took a hell of a lot of guts because women were really just not doing that.
By God, Mildred, this is really something.
And ultimately, she discovers sides of herself she never knew existed. A kind of sensual life and erotic life.
She's not a man-eater. She's really wanting to be loved very much.
She initially jumps at these other men, but you get exactly why she's doing it and what she needs.
And no sooner has the husband left when the next gentleman comes in and puts the moves on Mildred. And Lucy literally takes Mildred by the hand and gives her instructions on how to play this game now that she's a grass widow.
Within a month, he'll be taking you shopping for a divorce.
Wally Bergen, I would describe him as a business advisor, lawyer, part-time lover.
Might be able to put you in on a deal. One that would start you off with such a bang. You'd be sitting so pretty.
Mildred's relationship with all of these men is they all gave her something different. She meets Monty, and Monty is just the guy she never thought she would get.
I can't quite believe I'm doing this.
The fact that she is somebody who probably would normally say no, he finds incredibly intoxicating. It's about a great sense of fire with these two, a really great sense of passion. They're obviously very attracted to each other.
She was a little bit caught between the devil and the deep blue sea with Monty because in many ways he did sort of represent some kind of, devil with a wicked wit.
Hop in, I'll give you a lift.
No. I've actually come to enjoy the public pageantry. You're very kind, though.
Monty's never had to struggle. He's never really had to fight for anything. He's never had to work for anything. He really enjoys life.
Monty represents the kind of ideals of the kind of class and privilege and elitist cultural, inheritance that she wants for Vida.
And action on rehearsal.
Here. Is this new? You really ought to consult me first on a purchase like that.
Hold there, please.
Vida, to Mildred, I think represents every dream she ever had, every fantasy she ever played out in her own head. Mildred's dreams are really, truly dreams, whereas Vida has the talent and the skill to actually make those things a reality. It's sort of a wonderful and both terrible and devastating relationship at the same time, but it's also very representative and true, I think, of those close mother-daughter relationships.
What's really uncommon about this one is the unique place Vida occupies in Mildred's life, which is almost more akin to an unrequited love story.
Hello? Hello, Mother.
Really where man and love objects should reside in this woman's life, her daughter exists.
Sometimes when they fight, it's almost like a lover's quarrel. I think, they're so close, you picture them dying in each other's arms, they're never gonna separate or get away from each other.
The neediness that Mildred has is so incredibly unhealthy. No matter what that kid throws in her mother's face, she just will love her.
Are you even pregnant?
She knows that her mother will do anything she wants her to do, needs her to do, will show up for her, be there for her, buy her any fur, buy her any car, buy her love, buy her, literally.
She always wants to be living the high life. She's always wanted to be famous. She's always wanted to be like Monty, who is all sophisticated and he's famous. He plays polo. He's so amazing and fantastic. She wants to be exactly like him.
Monty is able to give her this fantasy existence that not only Mildred would have dreamt up for Vida, but that Vida has also started to yearn for and be really drawn towards, like a moth to a flame.
You might want to make a list so you remember who sent what.
Christ, I hate this dump.
She's just spoiled rotten, so she has no moral compass, she has no sense of right and wrong, she has no sense of what it feels like to be impoverished, because Mildred was determined that her child would never suffer.
There is an inherent clash in values that Mildred obviously instilled in Vida.
Isn't it too divine? Please, Mother, please, can I keep it?
All right.
Which come out of American middle-class sensibility, which is the desire to climb up the ladder.
She will do whatever it takes to get out and to be famous and to be rich and to be in New York. And she has this idea of, a certain class and a certain amount of money and a certain lifestyle. And, Pies and Glendale and her mother just do not fit into it.
That twist where the mother gets exactly what she wants, where the mother gets her unbelievably gifted genius daughter, who will condemn her to being excommunicated from her life. And that's really the sort of great sad, ironic twist about Mildred Pierce.
With enough money, I can get away from you.
You just fall for this incredible creature. But has that allure of somebody who's dangerous.
Vida becomes a coloratura soprano of some note in the 5th act of the story. And so she ends with her own version of Rainbows that she sings directly to Mildred. The song is actually derived from the Chopin Prelude. And there's a scene in which Vida is playing the Chopin Prelude and segues into Rainbows. So it figures as a popular sort of family favorite throughout the story. You even hear little Ray humming it in the bathtub.
The challenge was to find the voice that would be Vida's opera voice.
I was exposed to the recordings of Sumi Jo, who is a coloratura soprano. Amazing vocal range and register, but one that we felt also was convincing with Evan's age and size. Sumi Jo is actually tiny in real life.
We licensed 4 of her arias, and then we flew her in to record Always Chasing Rainbows.
I'm always chasing
I wanted to show the Angelica voce, which is very beautiful, heavenly voice. As a singer, it's nice. An actress, they represent my voice somehow. I want to think that way.
I mean, I'm a singer, but I'm not that kind of singer. So I tried to study opera singers as much as I could, and just had to learn every pause, every breath, every nuance to those songs.
She had an opera coach to help her with stance and breathing, and I think she put all the arias on her iPod.
I lived and breathed those songs for a couple months before we even started shooting. It was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of work.
And it worked. It worked with Evan as the source of this extraordinary instrument.
Mildred has experienced in her life, I think, heartbreak after heartbreak, but she is unbroken and she will not break.
You watch a middle-class woman evolve into a confident, attractive businesswoman. And each episode inherits its own unique shape.
Everyone keeps saying, oh, miniseries, da-da-da. There's nothing mini about any part of this.
Parle-moi de l'argent. Elle t'intéresse? Elle te regarde? Une belle salope qui ne dort jamais.
Quel est le montant acceptable pour tout lâcher et partir vivre votre vie? Plus.
Wall Street, l'argent ne dort jamais. Dans un instant à super écran.